Welcome to the Get Fit Guys, quick and dirty tips to slim down and shape up. My name is Ben Greenfield and I'm the Get Fit Guy. Now, you've probably seen it before, the infomercials on TV that feature this man or woman lounging happily on the couch while some fancy electrodes stimulate their stomach into an instant six-pack. These electrode machines, also known as electrical muscle stimulation or EMS, are becoming more and more common at online shopping websites and in fitness magazines. But isn't this too good to be true? How on earth could you actually shock yourself fit? Well, in this episode, you're going to find out whether you really can lose fat with electrical stimulation. So let's jump into the research on this whole EMS thing. A recent study entitled Effects of High-Frequency Current Therapy on Abdominal Obesity in Young Women, a randomized controlled trial, is a perfect example of research that looks into this very question about fat loss and EMS. In the study, a group of subjects received 30 minutes of high-frequency current therapy via a series of electrodes placed on their stomachs, just like on TV. The subjects did these sessions 3 times per week for 6 weeks for a total of 18 electrical muscle stimulation sessions. The researchers measured waist circumference, body mass index, subcutaneous fat mass, that's fat found under the skin, and body fat percentage. The results were surprising, especially considering these women didn't modify their exercise or diet. The electrical stimulation caused significant effects on decreasing waist circumference, abdominal obesity, subcutaneous fat mass, and body fat percentage, leading the study to note in the final results that, quote, the use of the high-frequency current therapy may be beneficial for reducing the levels of abdominal obesity in young women. Well, other studies have shown EMS to be helpful for everything from pain management to helping increase blood flow for warming up prior to performance-related activities. I discuss many of these concepts and some of this research in detail in an article I have called How to Use Electrical Muscle Stimulation to Enhance Performance, Build Power, and VO2 Max. And in that particular episode, I talk about using something called a complex electrical stimulation unit for power and performance. You can check that out in the link that I'll put in the show notes over at quickanddirtytips.com. I also have a podcast in which I talk about a different electrical muscle stimulation device called a Mark Pro. And the title of that podcast is How the LA Lakers, the Boston Red Sox, and over 104 other professional teams are maximizing recovery. So if you want to really delve into this, I'll put those links in the show notes for you. But now that you know that these devices aren't a complete sham, how can you actually use them? Well, here's 3 quick and dirty tips on how to use EMS. Tip number 1 is to work out with it. Now, I own several EMS units, and one of the workouts that I do with the more powerful unit, called a complex, which I mentioned earlier, is to attach the electrodes to my quads, the front of my thighs, and my hamstrings, the back of my thighs, and then I do 5 to 10 sets of body weight or barbell squats, while I simultaneously run the electrical current through the legs. This allows me to recruit way more muscle fibers than I'd normally be able to during a normal squat, which makes the workout far more difficult. I can also attach the electrodes to my chest, my shoulders, or both, and do push-ups, overhead presses, or bench presses for a similar upper body effect. Most EMS units allow you to choose the intensity of the current, so you can increase the pulse as you get stronger in the same way that you could increase the amount of weight you use for lifting as you get stronger. So that's one way. Another way is to do isometrics with EMS. Now, isometrics combined with EMS is a very effective way to increase the amount of lactic acid in a muscle, which can cause a huge improvement in your ability to tolerate the burn during hard workouts or competitions such as 5Ks, bicycling races, or weightlifting events. Now, to use EMS in this way, you begin by getting into an isometric position. So this would be, for example, getting into a squat hold or a push-up hold. Now, an isometric exercise, which is actually a combination of the Greek words isos, which means equal or same, and metron, which means distance or measure, involves you contracting your muscles without any visible movement in the angle of the joint. Now, this is in contrast to traditional moving contractions, which are called isotonic contractions, in which your muscle length and your joint angle change throughout the exercise. Now, if you've ever performed a wall squat, where you sit in an imaginary chair with your back against the wall for as long as you can, then you're familiar with the teeth-grittingly high levels of lactic acid and muscle burn that isometric hold this position style training can produce. Other examples of isometric moves would be a lunge hold, a push-up hold, a plank, or even a pull-up hold hanging from a bar. Now, to combine this style of training with EMS, you just do an isometric set, but for the muscle that you're working during the isometric set, you attach electrodes to it. This will significantly increase the number of muscle fibers you can recruit and the amount of lactic acid that builds up inside the muscle. And then tip number 3 is you can use EMS when you're sedentary or injured. Let's face it, there's absolutely no point in sitting on the couch with a bunch of electrodes attached to you unless there's a really good reason for you being on that couch. A good reason would be, for example, an injury that's left you unable to move around much, or perhaps a really, really good movie or a televised sports game. In most situations, it's better to just move around, go to the gym, or head outside to exercise. But if you have indeed been relegated to a sedentary position, you can use EMS to keep your muscles activated, and as that latest study I mentioned, to burn fat too. In addition to working muscles while you're recovering from an injury or watching a movie, you could also use EMS during car rides and even on airplanes. Yes, I've done that, and the TSA is fine with it, although you may get funny looks from your seatmate. You can even work your calf muscles while you're sitting at your desk at work if you're unable to use, for example, a standing workstation. Now, you should be aware of the following before you go out and grab an EMS unit. A TENS unit is often mistaken for an EMS unit, but they're not the same. TENS is short for transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, and it's a measure of nerve stimulation, not muscles. And so while that's good for pain management, TENS is much different than EMS. It's not going to hit your muscles. And then if your goal is fat loss or performance gains, you should know that the necessary frequency of electrical stimulation to achieve results can be a little bit uncomfortable. When you use EMS, you are literally shocking yourself. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can either place the electrodes improperly and stimulate muscle in a dangerous way, such as pulling your joint in two opposite directions. You could get skin burns, or you can just get no result at all. So be sure to thoroughly read the manual and the usage instructions for any EMS device you do before you haphazardly slap electrodes all over your body. Now, if you have questions about using electrical stimulation for fat loss or muscle gain or performance, or you want to share your own experience with EMS devices, then a great place to do that is facebook.com/getfitguy, where we've always got tons of interesting conversations going on about the kind of things I talk about right here on the podcast. And until next time, I'm Ben Greenfield, the Get Fit Guy, asking you, what are you waiting for? Go get fit.